Now please join us in a spirit of meditation and reflection of prayer as we deepen into our service and share our opening words for this morning. Do not leave your cares at the door. Do not leave there your pain, your sorrow, or your joys. Bring them with you into this place of acceptance and forgiveness. Place them on the common altar of life and offer them to the possibility of your worship. Come then and offer yourself to potential transformation by the creative process that flows through you and all life. Would Alma please come forward to light the chalice, which is a symbol of the spark of life in each of us. May this flame, symbol of transformation since time began, fire our curiosity, strengthen our wills, and sustain our courage as we seek what is good within and around us.
So during seminary, I had to read the Hebrew Bible. If you grew up in the Christian tradition, you might know this as the Old Testament. I found I had to keep putting it down to take a break because it was so intense. There was so much misogyny and genocide and rape. And I wondered about the implications of having these shared foundational stories at the root of our society. I asked anyone who would listen, do you think we are the way we are because that's our history and we would have come to this point no matter what? Or do you think we are the way we are because we hold on to those stories? Finally, one Unitarian Universalist said to me, you know, Jerry Falwell and Martin Luther King Jr. were the same religion. We use religion to justify how we already are. Oh, that was such a good answer that I quit asking the question. But it raised another question for me. How am I using religion to justify how I already am? And I wonder how you're using religion to justify how you are. It occurs to me that if our religion is not changing us, urging us to grow, it isn't doing its job. I want to pause here and define religion. I like to joke that I'm religious but not spiritual. Only really, I'm not joking. I don't know that I am very spiritual, but I am deeply religious. The word religion comes from the Latin, and its roots are a little bit murky. There are two main interpretations of the roots of the word and the concept of religion. Re legare and re legere. Re, R-E, means to go through something again. So you know this, return, revisit, reinvest. And legare means to tie, connect, or bind. So re legare then is to rebind or reconnect, to connect deeply. Legere means to read or see with care. So re legere is to reseed or reread, to see or read deeply. My personal theology is very much connected to those two definitions. I think they are fundamental to our Unitarian Universalist faith tradition as well. When I worked as a hospital chaplain, one of my fellow chaplains used to wrestle with what his role was when he walked into a room where the patient was not religious. I did not have that problem because I think every human being is religious. If religion is about reconnecting or rebinding, who among us is not affected by that? You may grapple with your connection to the sacred or the divine, however you define that, or you may grapple with your connection to other people and to all of life, or both. Theologian Bernard Loomer says, love does not create our essential interrelatedness. Love is an acknowledgement of it. We love because we are bound to each other, because we live and are fulfilled in, with, and through each other. We love because a failure to love is a denial of the other, ourselves, and our relatedness. When we reach out toward the other in sympathy or compassion or love, we acknowledge our oneness with others. His suffering becomes in part our suffering. His impoverishment diminishes us. Our response becomes his resource. In responding appropriately to the other, we are both fulfilled through the act, and life within the web of relationships is advanced. All the religious virtues are virtues of relationship. Love, which some refer to as the law of life, is obligatory because we are all members of one another, and because we are all members of the web of interconnectedness within which we all live. Without our interdependence within this web, love would not be obligatory. So it seems to me then that if you are alive and part of the interconnected web, you are compelled to engage in relationship, in re legere, in rebinding or connecting, which makes you a religious being. The intentionally religious person tries to go a bit deeper and more deliberately into relationship, and to do it well. Intentionally religious people also try to read or see more deeply, re legere. Unitarians talk about this in their search for truth and meaning, our desire to read and see clearly. I tend to think of this as our meaning making. We see or read what goes on around us in order to understand, in order to make sense of the world. We want our lives to have meaning. This is quite evident when you work in a hospital. I'm sick because God is punishing me. I'm sick because God knew I could handle this. He waited to die until John got here. She waited to die until we were all out of the room. She would not have wanted to live like this. They are finally free. My own theology says there is no meaning outside of what we create. But whether you think meaning comes from the inside or from the outside, we are all meaning-making creatures. It's part of being human. And again, that makes us religious beings. To my mind, then, religion is, at least in part, the life study of relationship and meaning-making. We are all religious beings if we accept those definitions. When I was a child, a message I received from my UU faith was that we are not worrying about what happens after death. Whatever happens will happen, but we can make a heaven or a hell out of this life. And clearly, it was our job to work on making this life closer to heaven than hell. I don't hear that much anymore, but I think Unitarian Universalists still embody the notion that our mission on earth is to make the world a better place. How should our religion, as I have defined it, be changing us? How should it be working in us to create a better world? For one thing, I think our religion should always be making us a little bit uncomfortable. Our Unitarian Universalist faith should be pushing, pulling, inviting, enticing us to be better people than we are right now, to encourage us to keep growing into a better version of ourselves and a better version of our community. So I want to pull all these thoughts about religion, that religion is about rebinding, rereading, making the world a better place, and helping us to grow, into some concrete examples. But I think we'll only have time for one example this morning. I had some assumptions when I came here because of your involvement with the water protectors and your no DAPL work. The language in your packet that you presented for interim ministers to read suggested that you had done some anti-racism, anti-oppression, multicultural work. There was certainly some wonderful energy around that work. I'm learning now that your work with the water protectors was a little like being thrown into the deep end of the pool and learning to swim. That you didn't have time for some of the internal work that often accompanies practicing a supporting role. So we're backing up a little bit now and doing some of that work. A lot of you are participating in the book group and learning about Indigenous history in this country. Someone remarked the other day that this is a hard read for people because it is so painful. For many of us, this is not the history that we were taught, and it definitely makes us uncomfortable. And isn't that terrific? This is the kind of uncomfortable that means we are doing religion well. We are re-seeing in order to form better connections. If we truly hold to our second principle of justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, we need to live into a bigger story. And besides history, I think we also need to begin to understand systemic racism and our place in that system. In his 2015 Ware lecture, Dr. Cornel West, the writer and intellectual, said, "I've got a lot of vanilla brothers and sisters that walk with me and say, 'Brother West, you know, I am not racist any longer. Grandma's got work to do, but I've transcended that.' And I say to them, I am a Jesus-loving, free black man, and I've tried to be so for 55 years, and I'm 62 now. And when I look into the depths of my soul, I see white supremacy, because I grew up in America. And if there's white supremacy in me, my hunch is you've got some work to do." We all have some work to do, because we all live in a system that values white over anything else. It is also a system that values cis, het, male, thin, and able-bodied. We are all conditioned by that system if you grew up in this country. Unless you were raised by wolves, the system has formed you and how you think. We call it white supremacy culture as a sort of shorthand. And this has caused some Unitarian Universalists who put so much stock in words, no end of consternation. We associate white supremacy with white supremacists and the KKK. Of course, we do not want to be painted with that same brush. Again, definitions matter. Educator Sharon Martinez says, white supremacy is an ideology that white people and the ideas, thoughts, beliefs, and actions of white people are superior to people of color and their ideas, thoughts, beliefs, and actions. We have similar ideologies that male is superior to female, cisgender is superior to trans or nonconforming, straight is superior to gay or bi or poly, and so on. Power and norms are deeply ingrained in our humanity. These things are expressed in our shared culture. Kenneth Jones and Tima Oken wrote a book called Dismantling Racism, a workbook for social change groups. In the book, they articulate about a dozen features of the culture of white supremacy, but don't worry, we're only going to tackle one today, which is perfectionism. And they list these points about perfectionism. Little appreciation expressed among people for the work that others are doing. Appreciation that is expressed usually directed to those who get most of the credit anyway. More common is to point out either how the person or work is inadequate, or even more common, to talk to others about the inadequacies of a person or their work without ever talking directly to them. Mistakes are seen as personal, i.e., they reflect badly on the person making them, as opposed to being seen for what they are, mistakes. Making a mistake is confused with being a mistake, doing wrong with being wrong. Little time, energy, or money put into reflection or identifying lessons learned that can improve practice. In other words, little or no learning from mistakes. Tendency to identify what is wrong with little ability to identify, name, and appreciate what is right. Does this sound familiar? Does it sound familiar within this congregation? They offer these antidotes. Develop a culture of appreciation where the organization takes time to make sure that people's work and efforts are appreciated. Develop a learning organization where it is expected that everyone will make mistakes, and those mistakes offer opportunities for learning. Create an environment where people can recognize that mistakes sometimes lead to positive results. Separate the person from the mistake. When offering feedback, always speak to the things that went well before offering criticism. Ask people to offer specific suggestions for how to do things differently when offering criticism. So I think our transition or interim period is a wonderful time to practice these antidotes. Can we express appreciation for people's efforts and their work? Can we think of ourselves as a community of learners eager to take risks and learn from our mistakes? Can we separate people from their mistakes? That's a big one. Can we do that? Is there a statute of limitations for punishing people for their mistakes in this community? Can we notice what we are doing well? Can we take responsibility for offering specific suggestions, and even more, can we take some responsibility for implementing those suggestions instead of being armchair quarterbacks? So I've heard a lot of people talk about this kind of perfectionism in their own lives, as in, oh, my white supremacy for perfectionism is kicking in on my need to have this presentation just so. And while that may be related, I think it misses the mark. This part of white supremacy culture is about how we treat each other and how we view mistakes. It's collective work. So we'll nibble away at the characteristics of white supremacy culture and think about how they are played out in our shared life this year. I went to a church and synagogue library meeting once with other members of my congregation's library. As we were leaving, our newest member said, "I still don't know if Unitarian Universalism is a faith." Another team member answered her, "We believe that we can make the world a more peaceful and a more just place. We believe that we need to learn with instead of against nature. We believe that love is better than hate. That takes a lot of faith. Of course, we're a people of faith." May we, in our faith journey, see and understand more deeply. May we take this journey together because love is obligatory. And may we deepen our connections. May our faith change us for the better. If you are who you were, and if the person next to you is who they were, if none of us has changed since the day we came in here, we have failed. The purpose of this community, of any church, temple, zendo, mosque, is to help its people grow. If we do this through encounters, or we do this with encounters with the unknown, in ourselves, in another, in the other, whoever that might be for us, however ever hard it might be, because these encounters have many gifts to offer. So may you go forth from here this morning, not who you were, but who you could be. So may we all go in peace.